How a poor Brooklyn kid created the most iconic coffee brand in the world, Starbucks. Decades ago, few Americans knew what coffee was, and some thought it came from a can. But a small retailer from Seattle changed that and later became the largest coffeehouse chain in the world, Starbucks. While the company was founded by three friends, none of them transformed Starbucks into a $100 million company. It was an outsider, a poor kid from Brooklyn, who had just graduated from high school, who built Starbucks, the world's iconic coffee brand. Let's get into this tremendous business success story. But first, a reminder to subscribe if you enjoy remarkable true stories like this. So, how did a poor Brooklyn kid create Starbucks? And how did it become the most iconic coffee brand in the world? Early life. The story begins when in 1962, a student at the University of San Francisco, Gordon Boker, went to a cafe in Rome and ordered a cappuccino. He was stunned by the taste, which was unique, incredible, and unforgettably memorable. At that time, the majority of Americans drink either overcooked coffee or instant coffee at home. He left USF after his return to the country and relocated to Seattle, where he was raised. He would travel from Seattle to Vancouver to visit a store that sold unroasted coffee beans to satisfy his addiction. On his way home after a coffee run in 1970, Gordon had the notion to start a store in Seattle. He discussed the concept with his two buddies, Jerry Baldwin and Steve Siegel, Howard Schultz. At the time, Howard Schultz had just graduated high school and was enrolling at Northern Michigan University. After graduating from college, he got a job at Xerox and became a successful salesman. But eventually, he started to feel restless and wanted something more challenging. In 1981, he noticed Starbucks had only 4 stores then, yet it was buying products in quantities larger than Macy's, one of the world's largest department stores. He had never been to Seattle before, but decided to visit to see what was going on at their original store in Pike Place Market. They only sold coffee beans, but sometimes offered tasting samples. Howard tried a sample and was hooked and felt like he had discovered a whole new continent. From successful salesman to marketing director. On his plane ride back to New York, he couldn't stop thinking about Starbucks and described it as a shining jewel. So he reached out to Jerry and asked if there was any way that it could fit into Starbucks. After 1 year, Jerry and Gordon invited Howard to San Francisco to meet their silent partner, Steve Donovan. Howard was certain that he would leave with an offer in his hand and fly back to New York, but he was mistaken. Jerry's business partner felt that hiring him would be too hazardous. But he called Jerry because he couldn't take no for an answer. He warned him that he was making a terrible mistake and that the destiny of Starbucks was at stake. The following day, Jerry called him to congratulate him on his new position and asked when he could visit Seattle. He observed Starbucks selling excellent coffee beans, but not serving coffee by the cup as he was walking to the exhibition. Starbucks was a retailer, not a bar. Howard once boarded a train for Verona, imitated someone else's coffee order, and placed a cafe latte order. No one had ever mentioned this beverage to him before, and he described it as the ideal blend of steamed milk and coffee. He pondered this in his head. In America, nobody is aware of this. I must bring it back with me. When Howard went back to Seattle and informed his superiors of his discovery, they regarded him as an overly enthusiastic marketing director. They said that Starbucks was a retailer and not a bar or restaurant. Trying out new ideas. After that, in 1984, Starbucks bought Pete's. The acquisition left them deeply in debt and deprived them of trying out new ideas. Jerry then put Howard's plan to serve espresso to the test, even though he didn't think it was a top priority. He volunteered to assist with the 6 Starbucks locations in downtown Seattle's grand opening. Despite the fact that business increased, Jerry believed that the store's success was incorrect and said that they were in too much debt to operate. For months, Howard struggled with depression and was conflicted between his commitment to Starbucks and his dreams for Italian espresso cafes. Il Giornale store. After that time, Howard went to a downtown athletic club to play basketball, where he was paired with a lawyer named Scott Greenberg. When he told his story to Scott Greenberg that he is thinking of going independent, Scott encouraged him and said investors might be interested. In 1985, he finally made the move and left Starbucks to start his own company, Il Giornale, the Italian word for newspaper. When he was planning on how to approach investors to raise money for his company, Jerry surprised them. He called him into his office and offered to invest $150,000 of Starbucks money. Howard was off to a great start with Jerry and Gordon's support. He thought he could attract all the money he needed within 6 months. Unfortunately, he received a series of rejections. Finally, his first store opened. It was a very humbling time for him when, in April 1986, Howard finally opened the first Il Giornale store. In the beginning, they made lots of mistakes by recreating an authentic-style coffee bar. They only played Italian opera, the baristas wore white shirts and bow ties, and there was no seating area. It wasn't appropriate for Seattle, and people started complaining. So they varied the music, added chairs, and offered takeout cups. Even though sales exceeded his projections, there were occasions when he wasn't sure he would have enough money to cover payroll or rent. A few months later, Howard made the decision to contact Jack Banaria, Herman Sikorsky, and Sam Elliott, three of Seattle's most well-known leaders. Herman decided to allow Howard to give a presentation to the three of them, and after meeting with the son Steve, they were adamant in their expectations for more affordable broad seat possibilities. But they collectively invested $750,000 despite their initial demands. Another tragedy. In 1987, Howard's luck got even better. Jerry and Gordon decided to sell Starbucks. To buy Starbucks, Howard would need to find $3.8 million. His investors were impressed with the progress that Il Giornale made within a short time, so he was confident that some of them would invest more money. But one day, they nearly fell apart, and he almost lost Starbucks before he even had it. A prominent Seattle businessman, who was one of his investors, intended to purchase Starbucks. He was certain that this individual would treat some of his early investors unfairly and would downgrade him from a large stakeholder to an employee. So, after developing a plan, Howard and Scott scheduled a meeting with the investor. Bill Gates, the creator of Microsoft, agreed to accompany Scott as his more senior partner. The investor warned Howard that if he didn't accept the offer, he wouldn't work in Seattle ever again, and the company would cease to exist and become dog meat. Modern Starbucks was born. Then, 2 days later, Howard met with other investors and put forth a suggestion that every investor in Il Giornale be given the opportunity to invest in Starbucks. They recognized the fairness of his proposal to them and respected his moral courage in rejecting the proposal that would have favored large investors at the expense of smaller ones. In a matter of weeks, Howard was able to raise $3.8 million he required, and on August 18, 1987, the modern Starbucks was established. This was the story of Starbucks, which was created by a poor Brooklyn kid who made it the most iconic coffee brand in the world. What is your opinion on this motivational story? Let us know in the comment box. For more inspiring videos like this, subscribe to our channel.